What's going on, my geeks? I'm Kakuyo and welcome to Home Base Serenity. Last week saw the completion of my top 5 Loadout series. I intended for the series to be completed a long time ago, but as you are aware from other videos, life just intervened. But with the first video in this series being uploaded 10 months ago, some things have changed. We've got new heroes, new team perks, and I've personally learned more about the game. Some of the loadouts have changed, some are exactly the same. So I thought it would be a good idea to go over the loadouts I've covered in the series so far and how they've changed since their video, if they have. I think this video is going to be a bit long for me to do my normal, here's how you can recruit these heroes section, so I'll be putting that on screen as I mention each hero. I think it's also going to be a little bit too long for me to do my normal references or memes, so this may not be as funny as my normal videos, but this is intended to be more of an informational video than anything. And also that's why I have no intro and I started right on my opening title card. Now to make this video a little bit more interesting though, I've decided to go over the rest of my loadouts that I use that I have no plans on doing an entire video on. For example, the first loadout, which is my farming loadout on Achaeolo-Jess. Before I go over this build, I want to say that I have it built just for farming and not for combat. I farm with my party on private, so I'm not trying to complete the mission I'm farming in. I'm just trying to get as many materials and resources as possible. And the reason I chose Achaeolo-Jess is because her perk gives a buff to anti-material charge, which every Outlander has as the heavy attack for their pickaxe. Her perk increases anti-material charge heavy attack efficiency by 128%. And with a certain build, it means you can use your anti-material charge several times over before you run out of energy. It makes farming so much quicker and easier. As far as how I've built this loadout, I've used the team perk Blast from the Past, which removes all of your shield and increases your max health by 200%. It requires 2 dinosaur heroes to activate, and one of them is also important to the effectiveness of anti-material charge, but I'll get to them in a moment. The first hero I have in support is Jess, who increases pickaxe damage by 17% for those times when I'm not able to or don't want to use anti-material charge. Next is Recon Scout AC. When you use phase shifts with him in support, you're granted a 30% increase to movement speed after using phase shift. Next is Fleetfoot Ken for an overall increase to movement speed of 12.5%. Now I'm on to the dinosaur heroes, and the first is Fossil Southie. With your shields gone thanks to the team perk, having him in support will regenerate 4 energy per second. Some prefer to use him as commander in a farming loadout because he regenerates 12 energy per second as commander, but I prefer the larger buff to anti-material charge that Achaeolo-Jess gives. Lastly is Prehistoric Itza. Since you need 2 dinosaur heroes to activate this team perk, I feel like this is the best one to use if you're not building this for combat, because she increases your armor by 33% when your shield is gone. And for my gadgets, unlike my other builds, I have the hover turrets to help when I need to get away from a bunch of husks while farming, but also the supply drop just to get some more supplies while farming. Next is a hero I have covered in a special loadout video at the beginning of this season, Raven. A hero created to match my favorite skin in Battle Royale. I was so excited to finally get this hero at the beginning of this season. As a quick review of his perk for anyone who hasn't seen the loadout video, Raven's perk is a 25% increase to lefty and righty damage, and each shot will cause explosions dealing 20 base energy damage in a half tile radius. This loadout is the most changed from the original video, so let's go over what I've changed and why I changed it. And the biggest change to this loadout is because of a team perk you're going to see a lot in these loadouts, Happy Holidays. I've gone over this in my last 2 hero loadout and challenge video sets, but for anyone who may not have seen those, this perk reduces ability cooldowns by 40%, and it stacks independently from other cooldown reduction perks, which is one of the reasons why I love it so much, and the reason why pretty much this entire loadout is different from what I covered previously. In fact, the only hero in this loadout that is the same as what I showed in my previous loadout video on Raven is Double Agent Evelyn, who decreases the cooldown of lefty and righty by 1 second for every pistol or SMG elimination. The cooldown on lefty and righty is already lowered to 60 seconds thanks to the team perk, and it lasts for 10 seconds, so 50 eliminations with an SMG or pistol and it's ready to go again. It usually ends up only being down for about 20 seconds or so in my testing and eliminate and collect. Another thing I've changed games is that I usually pop Warcry now before I use lefty and righty, because it does increase the fire rate and damage of lefty and righty, making it more effective overall. So to help with that, I have Special Forces Ramirez and Fight or Flight, which adds an additional 8.5% weapon damage buff and an 8.5% increase to movement speed, which you need as you're slowed down while using lefty and righty. In the previous loadout, I had Tactical Assault Sledgehammer, but I've swapped him out for Beetle-Jess, who has the exact same 75% critical damage buff as Tactical Assault Sledgehammer, except for pistols and SMGs instead of assault rifles and SMGs, which works better with the cooldown reduction from Double Agent Evelyn. Next up is Azalea Clark, who increases ability energy damage by 15.5%, which is yet another buff to the damage from lefty and righty, just this time to the explosions. The final buff for lefty and righty comes from Willow, who has Ghoulish Cackle, which increases all ability damage by up to 37.5% based on the percentage of your missing health. And again, since you're moving slower while using lefty and righty, you're going to be losing health. I am still using my standard gadgets of stationary hover turrets and adrenaline rush, which I use in all the other loadouts I'm going over today, so I won't mention them in the other loadouts since they are exactly the same. The next loadout is a loadout that I have never covered on the channel before. It's specifically built to go up against the mythic Storm King, and this loadout is on Link's Cassandra. In the last part of my top 5 loadout series, I mentioned that I had originally planned to do a video on her, but I changed my mind because of Razor. Well, it turns out she is incredibly effective against the mythic Storm King because of her Hang Time perk, which increases all damage dealt by 140% when hovering, which you get from using Kunai Storm. As for how I make her the most effective against the mythic Storm King, I start off with the same team perk I mentioned in my Achaeolo-Jess loadout earlier, Blast from the Past. I'll go over the 2 dinosaurs I have in support later. The first hero in support is Tactical Assault Sledgehammer for that increase of 75% to all assault and SMG critical damage. This helps out so much when I'm using my bundle bus on the crystals. When I'm going after the horns, I use a physical surround pound, which is classed as hardware, so I have Guardian Penny in support for an increase of 17 to hardware critical rating. The first of 2 heroes I have in support for some survivability is Bomb Squad Kyle, who increases your armor by 22. Now on to the last 2 heroes in the loadout, which are the 2 that activate the team perk. The first is Rex Jonesy, who adds 3% of current health to the damage of 1 ranged weapon hit every second. And with your shields gone and your health increased by 200%, this adds a lot of damage. Lastly is the other hero used for some survivability, Prehistoric Itza, for that armor increase of 33 while your shields are gone. The next loadout I want to review is Overtaker Hiro, the fun kunai spam build I showed in the last challenge video. This loadout has not changed at all since the last video. It still has Happy Holidays as the team perk to work with the cooldown reduction from eliminations that Overtaker Hiro has as commander to make it as spammable as possible. It also still has the increased range on Dragon Slash from Dragon Scorch and the energized trail for Dragon Slash from Snuggle Specialist Sarah. I do still have Razor in this loadout for her husk-seeking crystal daggers that are unleashed by Kunai Storm, and of course it still has Willow for that increase to ability damage and Fallen Love Ranger Jonesy to regenerate energy with eliminations. The one thing I do want to add is that I do still use Razor depending on how I feel and what I want to do with the kunais. And the build on her has not changed either, as she still has the same Happy Holidays team perk and the cooldown reduction from Overtaker Hiro. She also has the explosive eggs from Dashing Hare Kin and the bananas from Monks. And as with the Overtaker Hiro loadout, she still has Willow for the increase to ability damage and Fallen Love Ranger Jonesy to regenerate energy with eliminations. The loadout up next is also still exactly the same as before and is also 2 loadouts in one, my Mega Base Kyle and Heavy Base Kyle loadouts. Mega Base Kyle increases the connectivity of base from the standard 4 tiles to a massive 7 tiles as commander and from 4 tiles to 5 tiles in support. Heavy Base Kyle has the Feel the Base perk, in which base is charged by eliminated enemies standing on structures affected by base, and after 30 charges, base emits a Nova explosion dealing 30 base energy damage in a 3-tile radius in support and 89 base energy damage in a 5-tile radius as commander. I swap these 2 Kyles out based on the mission. If I need more connectivity for base, I use Mega Base as commander with Heavy Base in support. If the objective is smaller, I use Heavy Base as commander with Mega Base in support. And the rest of the loadouts for the 2 are exactly the same. Starting with the team perk, Super supercharged traps, which increases the damage of traps affected by B.A.S.E by 8.5% for each constructor, which totals 42.5% since the entire support crew are constructors. The rest of the support starts with Thunder Thora for electrified floors, which deals 12.7 base energy damage to any enemy standing on a structure affected by B.A.S.E. Then the Ice King and his Frozen Castle perk, which snares enemies standing on structures affected by B.A.S.E by 15%. Then B.A.S.E Kyle for an increase of 28% to the building health of structures affected by B.A.S.E, and Power B.A.S.E Penny for power modulation, which heals structures affected by B.A.S.E by 4% of their max health every 10 seconds. The next loadout has changed slightly from when I covered it. This is my Reclaimer loadout on Fragment Flurry Jess, who generates fragments for every 13 eliminations. Fragments lower the cooldowns on Teddy and Shock Tower, allowing you to use them more, and they get rather spammable with the loadout I have for her, which starts with, you guessed it, Happy Holidays as the team perk for that ability cooldown reduction. And I get even more cooldown reduction from the first hero in support, which is Old Glory A.C, because spending a charge fragment with him in support lowers the cooldowns on Teddy and Shock Tower an additional 10%. All of these cooldown reduction perks means I have about 3 seconds between the time a Teddy ends and the time I can throw down another, and 7 seconds from when I throw down a Shock Tower before I can throw down another, which is one of the reasons why I love this loadout so much. So the rest of the loadout perks up Teddy and Shock Tower, starting with Enforcer Grizzly for an increase of 4 seconds to the duration of Teddy, which is also part of what causes there to be only a 3-second downtime for Teddy with this build. Then Shock Specialist AC for Up the Voltage, which increases Shock Tower damage by 33%. Up next is the only change to this loadout. I've swapped out Stare Down Southie for Willow for that increased ability damage I discussed in other loadouts. Lastly, Jilly Teacup for her Under Warranty perk, which gives Teddy a 5% chance to malfunction, and during malfunction causes Teddy to find a new target after every shot. Plus, Teddy has a 100% crit chance against new targets. Up next is another loadout that actually hasn't changed at all from when I covered it, but I still want to go over it again here, and it's on my favorite soldier loadout in the game, Breakbeat Wildcat. She has the Battle Beat perk, which grants Rockin' Riff for eliminating 4 enemies in 9 seconds as commander, or 10 enemies in 9 seconds in support. Rockin' Riff increases damage by 50% and melee attack speed by 32%, decaying over 8 seconds. Pair that with the team perk Totally Rockin' Out, which gives even more buffs to Rockin' Riff, as with it, Rockin' Riff will also increase crit rating by 160 and heals 73.75 base health each time you proc it. In support, to activate the team perk, I have Varsity Hero for his Fumble perk, causing eliminations to have a 7% chance to drop a football, which will grant Rockin' Riff, and Mainstage Quinn for Subwafers that you have a 32% chance of earning from harvesting metal objects, which, when consumed, will grant Rockin' Riff immediately. Next up is Tactical Assault Sledgehammer for his increase to the crit damage of assault rifles and SMGs that we've discussed earlier. Some say he would put out more damage as commander with Breakbeat Wildcat in support, perhaps. In fact, I have a video planned to test this in a different way than I already have, which is going to be a collaboration with Death Grip, where we go into the same mission together and see who puts out the most damage. Keep an eye out for that in the coming weeks. Lastly, I have Bulletstorm Jonesy and Crackshot, who both grant stacks of ranged weapon damage for each shot fired. Bulletstorm Jonesy increases ranged weapon damage by 1% with each shot and stacks up to 25 times, and Crackshot grants Holiday Spirit for each shot fired, which increases ranged weapon damage by 1% but decreases weapon stability by 0.2%, both stacking up to 50 stacks, and both of these perks are removed immediately upon swapping weapons. The last set of loadouts takes us all the way back to the beginning of this channel and the first loadout videos I put out, as I'm going to go over my favorite ninja loadouts, starting with Harvester Sarah and her Scythe to Meet You perk, which increases scythe damage against slowed or snared enemies by 62% as commander, and additionally as commander, scythes will apply 30% snare for 2 seconds. But if I want to use my Founder's Blazing Masamune, which is one of my favorite swords in the game, I change her out for Sword Master Ken, who increases sword damage while in Shadow Stance by 25% in support and 75% as commander. But there's also a newer commander that I've been loving using lately, and that's Deadly Blade Crash, who has the Corrosive Strikes perk. You might remember that I had her in my original Harvester Sarah and Swordmaster Ken loadouts. With her perk, melee attacks apply 30% snare and affliction for 3 seconds. The affliction will deal 37% damage per tick in support and 87% damage per tick as commander. And there's a specific weapon that I use with her, but I actually have a video planned as part of a new series, and she's the first one in that series. So we'll talk about that later. Let's go over the loadout, starting with the team perk, which is Dim Mak, which regenerates 1.8% shield per second for each ninja in support while you're in shadow stance. Originally, I had 5 ninjas, but I only have 4 now. This is also another loadout that has changed drastically since the original videos. The only heroes that are the same are the heroes that buff Dragon Slash that I mentioned earlier in this video, Dragon Scorch and Snuggle Specialist Sarah. Everything else is different. Next up in support is Lotus Assassin Sarah. With her in support, dealing melee weapon damage grants 1 stack of Assassination, which you can stack up to 5 times. Assassination lasts 5 seconds and increases melee weapon damage by 4.5% per stack. And you can keep all 5 stacks going as long as you're continually eliminating husks. Then I have Whiteout Fiona in her perk Anatomy Lessons, which increases the critical rating of swords, axes, and scythes by 15%. Lastly, Arlene Itza in her Monster Smash perk, which increases the life leech with melee attacks and going Constructor by up to 15% based on the percentage of your missing health. And that does it for all of my loadouts that I could use on a normal basis. I know some didn't change at all, and some changed significantly. I just wanted to go over a few loadouts that I haven't gone over, and I didn't want to make videos on, but to also quickly update the ones that I have gone over and have changed the most since their respective videos, as these loadouts now perform better than the original versions and are more fun. I'd like to give you a quick update on my Twine Peaks SSD series. After talking with Death Grip and CJ, I've decided to delay working on that anymore until next season. We all know that the spawn points are different now from when I recorded the gameplay and setup content months ago now, and I am going to update anything that is no longer accurate in that content. But we also know that there are probably going to be some changes with the next season, as some conflicting spawns are supposed to be fixed. So we figured it was best to wait it out and see where they stand in the new season before I do anything more with that, so I can give you the most accurate and up-to-date information possible. I do have plenty of content to create between now and then though. Next up on the channel will be the second part of my Stonewood SSD game guide, focusing on SSDs 7 through 10. Then, if we have a Battle Royale live event, I'll try to do a video on that. And I also plan on doing a Chapter 2 Season 1 wrap-up video for both modes of the game, like I did with Season X. And of course, there are so many other game guides that I want to do, and I've even come up with a few new series I want to create. So if you want to see any of those videos I've just mentioned, please make sure to hit the subscription button and the notification bell so you can see each new video as soon as it goes live. And if you have any different ways you would build any of the heroes I've shown off in this video, please let me know. As I've said before, I love seeing the many creative ways that other players build support for their commanders. As always, shoutouts to my favorite Save the World content creators, both past and present: Latana, Demon Joe France, David Dean, Tori X, Aiden Harris, Rounded Tic Tac, Death Grip, Nylek Dreams, X Samantha, and Enforcer. I've linked all of their channels down below. Oshicho arigatou gozaimashita, and stay cool, geeks. Itakimasu!